Welcome everybody to our information session on mitochondrial health and our Nrf1 synergizer. So my name is Sam Sundara, and today I'm going to share with you what I've learned over the years about what I like to call holistic mitochondrial medicine. All right, so I'll share my screen with you and we'll get these slides started. Okay, hopefully you can all see that. Great. Okay, so I've worked as a naturopath, a therapist and health coach for around 22 years. And during that time, one of the things that I did was I worked with a doctor who actually specialised in environmental medicine. And he was the one that initially taught me the importance of healthy mitochondria and also what most commonly damages our mitochondria, which we'll get more into later. So working at this doctor's clinic and then later on in my own practice too, but particularly in this clinic, just about all of our patients were chronically fatigued. Some had other chronic illnesses as well, but most of them had chronic fatigue related issues. So, the thing was that many of these people, they had what seemed like a really healthy diet and lifestyle. They seemed to be doing all of the right things, but they were still unwell. And, many people say this. They've learned how to look after themselves. They are really taking care of themselves with diet and lifestyle and other factors, but they're still feeling under par. So what's going on? Well, we need to look specifically at what's going on in your cells, and more specifically in our mitochondria, which actually power our cells, producing our cellular energy. And, because poor energy equals poor quality of life. Everything suffers without it. And there's going to be a decreased ability to cope with stress as well, with long-term fatigue. And this really impacts very negatively on people's relationships. And it can become a real downward spiral for a lot of people because the stress of this leads to further fatigue and so on. And so how do we break this cycle? So just a quick review of our mitochondria, the structure, before I go putting it together with a bit of a holistic view. Okay, so I like to think of our mitochondria as our tiny little energy factories. They produce what we need for our cells to be fueled and to be powered. They're these tiny little powerhouses, or you could think of them as tiny little batteries in our cells. So we breathe in order to take in oxygen, and that oxygen gets delivered by the red blood cells to our mitochondria. And so oxygen actually fuels this process, and it has to be present for it to occur. And so your mitochondria uses the oxygen to convert the glucose and the amino acids into ATP. And they also metabolize fats, as you can see here. So we have mitochondrial DNA in every single cell in our body, except for our red blood cells. They are the regulators of cell metabolism. So they're just so important. Okay, so what happens when we don't take care of our mitochondria? So there's lots and lots of things that will happen. And you could add a lot more to this list, but these would have to be some of the most common links, known links. And of course, we don't claim to cure or treat or mitigate any a specific disease or issue. We're just noting the links here. So essentially your cells are going to be in standby mode with this going on. So without any power, the simplest way to think about it is when your phone is in low battery mode and its functionality is going to be really reduced. So that's what happens to us. And eventually our cells will power right down, which we don't want. So this is how it can manifest. That's a really big list, hey? There are so many disease processes going on here with this picture, including major neurological issues, which are really, really on the rise. Because a loss of power, it means a loss of garbage collection and lots of other functions. So you can imagine the result of this over time. So I believe, and what many health professionals are realising, is that so much of what's going wrong in people's health today is because their mitochondria is not functioning well. And this includes aging-related issues. And the mitochondrial theory of aging basically suggests that as the mitochondria are damaged, and then enough of them are damaged inside the cell, and then you lose lots of cells, and then that loss of cells is a major driver of aging. Okay. So there are several really, really common factors that can severely damage our mitochondria, and these are some of the most common ones. It's important to realise that our mitochondria aren't just these mindless energy pumps. One of their biggest functions is that within the cell is cellular defense. So the mitochondria actually detect when there's any threat to the cell, and it will switch it into cellular defense mode and switch off our energy production mode. And this creates kind of like a hibernation-like state. And this is, of course, commonly experienced as chronic fatigue. And a lot of animals do this as well as part of their survival mechanism, because this extends their lifespan. So back in my days practicing, I used to use a biofeedback system to detect cellular stress and what was going on in the cells. And I found that mitochondrial stress was just so common. And this mostly led me to find specific kinds of toxicity that were keeping the cells in this defense mode. So this was usually heavy metals, other toxins and chemicals, and particularly viruses. These kind of chronic viruses like Epstein-Barr are really common as well. So when you see this list, would you agree that, you know, most of us, if not every single person that we know, would have at least one of these factors, if not multiple? And a lot of people would have all of these factors going on to varying degrees. So we wonder why people are getting sicker. All right. So how do we take the power back? So how do we switch back over to energy production mode and enhance our cellular energy production? So what we need to do is we want to build bigger, stronger, and more mitochondria, basically. So how do we do that? So, you know, there are safe and effective ways, natural and effective ways to do that. And I've always believed in a really holistic approach, because I feel that if we're not addressing what actually made us sick in the first place, then it's a little bit like mopping the floor, but you're leaving the tap dripping and the sink flowing over. So we need to have a look at all of these elements. And then step 5 is really, really powerful. So, of course, we're not going to be sleeping for 12 hours, but this is 12 hours of darkness when we're resting, and hopefully we're not under, lots of bright lights or having too much screen time, because this really, really affects it as well. Because this will affect our melatonin production, and suppressed melatonin production will weaken our mitochondria over time, because one of its functions is actually to protect the mitochondria from damage. And evidence suggests actually that blind people have a low cancer rate, and obviously they're not experiencing a lot of blue light. And shift workers who have this cycle disrupted, they have a high rate of cancer. So very interesting link. So step 2 and 3 here are pretty self-explanatory. Step 4, balancing the gut biome. This is really important because an unhealthy gut is going to be feeding into this toxicity. So step 5, we can use synergistic natural ingredients to boost our mitochondrial quality and production with our Nrf1 synergizer. So this has been found to increase mitochondrial biogenesis or production. So this formula, it goes hand in hand with Nrf2 activation, our Nrf2 activator, and this is to provide whole cell support. So Nrf2 is important to take care of that increased free radical production that occurs as the result of increased mitochondrial production. And you can actually purchase these together for a discounted price. So normal mitochondrial function actually produces free radicals as a byproduct, and a normal healthy body can generally deal with this. But for most of us, these pathways have become compromised and very sluggish, and so we need to activate them again, and we need to keep them activated for optimal mopping up of these free radicals. And what we need to understand is that if you value your health and you want to prevent illness, or if you already have a chronic illness of some kind, it takes many, many years for the disease process to develop into chronic symptoms and health issues. So what's the best way of reversing, beginning to reverse that and preventing further disease progression and problems later on down the track? Well, in my opinion, it's really to optimize our cellular health and function, because this is where it all starts. And the science does demonstrate that we need both Nrf1 and Nrf2 for optimal cellular function. Okay, so one last slide. I thought this is a good one to end on. So we don't want to let this happen to us. All right, so that's it. That wraps it up for today. I hope you enjoyed this information session, and thank you so much for being here and tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day.